Then there was the bowling club, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, you see, the bowls club was central. There were a couple of tennis courts, and there was a putting green where the hard court was at the front of the bowling green, and we used to go down there very often putting. Tuppence for a round it was.
There was a golf course on the common, right?
Well, there was. I mean, I remember in the last stages of disrepair, if you like. I mean, certainly in the late 30s, the only bloke I can remember playing up there was Inspector Rogers, who was then our police inspector. But it wasn't terribly active as I remember it, but certainly there is evidence of a golf course up there.
And was there any croquet?
Not that I'm aware of. There may well have been. There may well have been.
So that apart from the cricket and football, the other sporting activities were down in the property.
Yes, tennis and bowls and putting were down there. And I don't recall anything other than that. Apart from fishing, of course, because the Kennett has always provided sport for lots of people.
Was there a clay pitting club?
Could have been, but I have no remembrance.
There was one.
Was it?
But before your time, I expect. I found a record of it.
Yeah.
Back round about the First World War.
Yes.
Well, that seems to have covered most of the activities.
Oh, it doesn't cover it by any man.
Now you start, well, it's covered my list, now you can start
No.
your bits and pieces.
I mean, one has to think of the things which the town council rubbed up against, and like the 53 celebration for the coronation,
Yes.
which was a great event in the town, and involved lots and lots of people, and we introduced the carnivals again, because the carnivals, the pre-war carnivals, had fallen into disuse, and Margaret, my wife, was in fact a princess pre-war, and we have the photographs to go along with that, when Mrs. Harvey, old Major Harvey's first wife, was in fact a carnival queen, because then the tradition was that you sold tickets, and the person who sold the most tickets was the carnival queen, which is a tradition which I believe is still continued in Cornwall.
Tell me, I understand the carnival started to raise money for the ambulance, St John's ambulance, originally.
Before the war?
Before the war.
Could well have been.
And somebody called Edwards used to bring us fare.
Edwards was born in the High Street, in fact.
Yes.
My old uncle Bill Clifford always used to have a long reminiscence with Mr. Edwards when he came into the High Street. Edwards' fair was based mostly then at Swindon, and he introduced me to Mr. Edwards when he was quite an elderly man, who always claimed that he was actually born in the caravan in the High Street. Because the fairs in the High Street, as I remember them, were tremendous events. But of course we actually ran them as a carnival event in the early 50s, and it was, and again my father was the secretary of the carnival thing at the time, and Margaret and I, we used to run the carnival queen competitions, and we actually took over the fair from the fairground people for carnival proceeds on one particular evening. But they were up to so many dodges to make sure we didn't get full value for money. We've had the various stores propped up with pennies. They smuggled a few to us and a few went under the counter. But we made good profit. I've got the balance sheet somewhere of that carnival in 1953. But we started them again in the 50s, basically because we were looking longer term to start a swimming pool, which we eventually achieved. Of course, the swimming pool became a major albatross around our necks because the cost of running the same was enormous until we finally persuaded the Newbury District Council, after it took over from Hungerford. The Hungerford District Council was disbanded in 74, and Newbury took it over, and we were grateful because it was an enormous expense.
Yes.
But I remember in particular the great characters on the town council at the time, people like Stephen Neat and Major Harvey and Bertie Bushell and Bertie King and my father, Jerry Watson, and people like that. There were great characters there. And the early days of the brigade, of course, in the fire brigade. They were enormously fun, because I was by miles the youngest bloke in there. I was expected always to run the fourth length, because competition running with the brigades, which we did a lot of, and we got into the final for several years, because the county competitions for brigades then were great fun. And always I copped the fourth length, which meant I had to run the farthest and actually use the hose, because I was the youngest, which was fair enough. But they were tremendous fun.
And that, of course, changed when it became a National Fire Service.
Oh no, gosh no. I mean, the National Fire Service only operated from the period 41 up until, I suppose, until Berkshire and Reading came back into being in the late 40s. So the National Fire Service really only operated here for a period, relatively short period. It was the Hungerford Volunteer Fire Brigade pre-war, and then the AFS was formed in 1938, which brought a whole host of new people in.
Yeah.
And the National Fire Service came in 1941, which continued until that was disbanded in the late 40s, I suspect, because when I joined the brigade in 51, it was already the Berkshire and Reading Fire Brigade again. And it still is. Still is a county fire brigade.
And so what else can you recollect from your years?
Oh. Difficult to remember in those early days because I was a junior member and there were lots of senior people doing things. I was first chairman in 1965 and I did that for 4 or 5 years up until 69 when Becky Kennedy became chairman. And then, whilst we were the same body, then it was a parish council. It wasn't until we had the opportunity to become a town council, as indeed everyone did who felt they were justified in asking to become a town council and appointed the mayor in 74, that the thing, it was incredible, people's perception changed. Because we were always called Hungerford Town, it was just the way Hungerford was described. It was always the Hungerford Town Football Club, the Hungerford Town Cricket Club, even though we only had a parish council. The town and manor trustees, you see, perhaps,
Yes.
to a degree, took the spotlight off the parish council, but it all changed in 74. And certainly my period as mayor from 78 to 81 actually saw us engaged in that funny business of twinning, which was an enormously uplifting experience, and certainly widened Hungerford's horizons. But this is relatively modern history, and it's still to be written, and you're more interested in things that happened a long time ago.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's all the gradual development
Yeah.
of the place.